Regardless of your politics, the news of cuts to federal agencies and university and other research may be concerning to you. Perhaps you have a family member, friend, or neighbor who is impacted. But what is the greater impact? Dan Powers, our speaker today, has 25 years' experience in policy assessment and public engagement for both government agencies and economic development organizations, including the Boulder Chamber, where we met 20 years ago. Since 2016, Dan has led CoLabs, a nonprofit consortium of more than 30 federally funded research laboratories and joint university institutes, and a broad ecosystem of technology-oriented companies and economic development organizations in Colorado. Dan sees the spectrum of brilliant scientists and technologists in the CoLabs network as a huge national asset, engaged in crucial projects to benefit humanity. He champions how taxpayer-funded scientific research is the taproot of innovation necessary to address America's national challenges and maintain global leadership. Please welcome Dan Powers.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about the status of and what I believe is still the most crucial mission of taxpayer-funded research entities here in our country. We've adopted just more recently a new hashtag at CoLabs, which is Science is National Security. And that doesn't just mean in a military sense. It really is regarding the ways that what we have received in terms of data and discoveries out of federally funded research labs across the country over decades has been the foundation of our national prosperity and national security. And that's some of the context that I would look to describe the status of our federal labs in Boulder County today. A brief background, so many of you would recognize there's the NIST building underneath the Flatirons there on Broadway. And I wanted to provide a little context to who CoLabs is for those of you who may not know. We were started in 2007 under then Governor Bill Ritter with the Boulder Chamber of Commerce, Metro Denver Economic Development Corporation, several laboratories such as the National Renewable Energy Laboratory and NIST, and the research universities of CSU and Colorado, University of Colorado, and several technology companies, larger companies that you would likely recognize, think Vysela and Xcel Energy. The impetus to start CoLabs was that there was a concern born of senatorial horse trading conversations going on in the mid-2000s of moving a couple federal labs out of Colorado to another state. And when that realization came to the business community and to the labs themselves, as you imagine, the first reaction was, so who thinks this is a good idea? Why is this even a discussion? It became apparent very seriously that the labs themselves, born of how the protocols are of federal funding, they're not allowed to advertise for themselves. There's no marketing arm of a federal agency. They can educate, but it's not the same as actually going out and doing what those of you who are from the business community would know is really marketing the value of yourselves. So quickly, the governor's team and the Boulder Chamber, those other players I was describing, they formed CoLabs, and the first deliverable was an economic impact study to describe the actual ROI of federal funded research in Colorado. In 2009, then that first report via the Leeds Business School at CU Boulder showed there was about a $1.5 billion impact on the state's economy and 9 different federal labs and roughly 6,000 federal employees with an additional several thousand of indirect jobs born of those labs. When that study came out, then over the next couple of years, I'm going to segue here as you can start looking through these labs, several hands were raised and people came out of the woodwork saying like, so why weren't we in that study? And basically it was because there's the, say, usual suspects, or the people who were in that initial conversation with NOAA and NIST and NREL, and there is no agency across the federal government, and certainly not in Colorado, that's responsible for knowing what other federal agencies are doing. That stereotype of the silos of government sometimes is very well deserved, and here in Colorado, part of what CoLabs has been doing as part of our mission is to help bridge the silos of government and make sure that each of these entities know what the other is doing through different kinds of events and convenings and meetings. And in that way, we can leverage this ecosystem that has grown up over decades. And I will notice this isn't really a full listing, and a caveat, because I know there's some people who have worked in federal labs or just have deep awareness of the federal labs here. Step back. Department of Energy following World War II. If you've seen Oppenheimer, you see some of the real genesis of our federal lab system. With a capital N and capital L, a national lab are the labs that are under the Department of Energy's purview. We use the term federally funded lab to mean any research entity in Colorado that's receiving 51% or more of its funding from the federal government. Hence, this larger list. And really these subcategories under a given federal agency, we are able to reference that there are about 40 different federally funded research labs. And with a general public type of audience, or often with a political audience, it's more helpful to reference these specific labs with their names that will give you more of a sense of what it is that they're researching and what they're doing there, as opposed to just saying Department of Energy labs or Department of Transportation labs, et cetera. So real quick, the labs that are in Boulder County, and there are actually a few more, but I put these up here to re-prompt your awareness. They are covering a spectrum of different research themes. Of course, atmospheric and climate science has been an emphasis here in the Boulder region going back decades. Keep some of these labs in mind, as I'll be referencing some of the details of these. There's also the university and college joint institutes, and this is another category of federally funded research lab which has been crucial to Boulder's scientific ecosystem and the economic impacts of the federal labs here. The ones that are on the top half are references to CU Boulder, and then there are also some of the labs that are connected with Colorado State University and Colorado School of Mines. They're into a different both county and congressional district. But I want you to have this broader sense of all the different places where our tax dollars, federal funds come in and support a range of research. Just within the National Science Foundation, there's over $300 million that comes to Colorado in NSF awards. This is the FY23. It's roughly the same now. It's actually been a bit more, but in terms of formal numbers that we are comfortable and more or less allowed right now to be able to describe. This gives you some broader context there. The largest recipients are University of Colorado and Colorado State University. The School of Mines also has a significant portion there. On the previous slide, if you recognize the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research, that's the organization funded by the NSF that operates the National Center for Atmospheric Research. They're also one of the key recipients of NSF funding. So stepping back again at this higher level, the impact on the state's economy is roughly $2.3 billion, and this is in terms of the direct spending of these federal facilities across the state. These are numbers from actually 2 years ago, and we had just started our most recent economic impact study effort in January, unfortunately, and getting numbers right now has been, it's not even difficult, it's impossible. The responses, if we get one from the labs that we've reached out to, has really been, that is not information that's made public, or more of a deflection is, please call 1-800-Washington, D.C. to this laboratory or agency head, and they will tell you, and they don't answer, or they have imagine information I've been familiar with getting over the last decade around what are the budgets for a given lab, or how many employees do you have? They'll say, you need to submit a FOIA request for that now. So this, in a good way, these numbers have grown slightly from what you'll see on the screen here, but getting the latest numbers, which we intended to do in Q1 here, has been virtually impossible. I'll direct you to the bottom of the screen there, though. The Boulder County segment of our overall statewide national lab ecosystem is incredibly robust, with about 3,000 employees, 3,500 across the federal labs that are here, and then that larger number that you see, really 7,600, is because of the indirect jobs. Think this is everything from consultants to janitors to construction workers, the companies that have business because of their interactions with the labs. And the most significant cost or expenditure, I should say, for the labs in Boulder County and really throughout the state are salaries. So the jobs at federal labs, at least from our previous last study, showed that it's significantly, or well, around a good $110,000 average across the federal agencies in terms of the salaries. So the money that the scientists have, or all of the employees across federal labs, granted that's an average, so yes, there's the younger, newer scientists, and then there are the people who maybe have been there in a leadership position or more for their career. But this is a puzzle piece for the state's economy, for the city's economy, that empowers a lot of recreational spending, a lot of philanthropic donations, and other types of investments into the community. There's other intangible benefits to the labs that we just would like to also mention that goes beyond, say, direct financial. Probably the biggest way to perceive the labs benefit here has been in a mentorship or a brain trust kind of impact to the local business community and to the nonprofit sector, the community and civic organization sector of Boulder County, and of the state. The expertise and people that I've met just, well, in rooms like these and in often surprising places when you're volunteering to help build a trail, or you're volunteering at homeless shelter, and you're meeting people whose professional world is something deeply involved. They've been spending their entire career researching, well, quantum physics is definitely a big one here in Boulder, or some ecology or aerospace, or even just food production, soil veracity, soil moisture retention veracity. It's so inspiring, the scope of the knowledge that is here from the federal labs in Boulder County. Just a brief reference back here, because I'll be suggesting or offering that you all engage further with collabs if you're interested. Much of our activity involves convening the scientists, elected officials, and technologists, private sector entrepreneurs, and business leaders of all kinds in focused agenda gatherings. Often they're online, but as much as we can, we also arrange typically a couple dozen lab tours a year, and the intention is to get the right people in the room meeting the other right people. I'm fortunate to help convene folks and then step back and get out of the way as they now realize, oh, given what you just presented on, here's what we need to talk about more. And that whole network or say fabric nurturing activity is a key part of what Collabs does. The other side of our activities is really in the realm of political advocacy, and we are frequently making statements to our elected officials. We are arranging surveys of our members. We are arranging meetings with both our senators, with Congressman Neguse, and other elected officials and their staff. The lab tours that I mentioned, we have just a standing invitation to all of our delegation staff. So that's part of the value of being a Collabs member, is often the people that you meet on a tour, which is also typically 12, 15 people, it's not a large event, are not only the scientists at a lab, but the ability to connect quickly with Congressman Neguse's staff, or with Senator Bennett's staff, and with someone from an economic development organization. I should plug John Taylor and the Boulder Economic Council, and Joe here, because they're one of the founding members. of collabs. And then lastly, I'll just finish with I have a couple points that I want to read off here that are brand new, but leave you with the, I can get the clicker to work here. When we are speaking about the value of the labs, know that of course here in Boulder, we have a very well-deserved, reasonable self-interest in, yes, these labs are important. The spectrum of research that's happening here has a ripple effect into nurturing industries and companies and has done so for decades. Obviously, this needs to continue to be supported. This is a worthwhile investment as an American in our own prosperity and our own future. If you leave CD2, even elsewhere into Colorado, let alone go out into another state and start to tell that story, it very quickly can be perceived as like, well, that sounds great for you, but why should I care? And even more challenging has been when we would go to another state to speak to, or when we speak to a congressperson from another state who's on a committee of relevance, as we would say, Appropriations Committee, the House Space Science and Technology Committee, the committees in Congress, both House of Representatives and Senate, who have authority over the federal agencies who are funding research here in Colorado. If you go too far down the road of describing that list that I showed you at the beginning of all these labs that have grown their existence here organically over several decades, the conversation will go to a place of like, why do you have so many there? Why? We don't have any in our district. How come you have so many there? It doesn't seem like you really have any problem. If anything, you have more than you deserve. So know that as we're championing the value of labs here, hence this reference to them being a national asset, over the last several years, this is really even before COVID, a lot of CoLabs' work is understanding the partnerships and the ripple effects regarding the research of the labs in Colorado and getting the stories as to where those discoveries, where that data is used elsewhere in the country, and continuing to remind any given audience that yes, they may be located here in Colorado, but that doesn't mean that their impact is Colorado-centric. And here are the ways that you, Congressperson Jones, or you, Economic Development Leader Smith, should understand that the technology that are coming out of these labs are an asset for you, and maybe one of those silver linings that we've all seen from COVID has been the virtual access, the ability to remotely access data and be comfortable with more virtual meetings, realizing here are the databases that I can access through the internet. I don't have to go there personally and visit. That has been a big part of how the lab's value has continued to be recognized. And broadly speaking, I would say keep that in mind if you're looking to champion the value of taxpayer-funded research to your friends, especially if they're not in Colorado, is that what is going on in these labs is really meant to be a resource for all of America. And I'll take any of your suggestions and examples too afterwards about how you've seen the labs be a resource for companies, for organizations in Colorado and really anywhere. I think that's where I left it there. Yes, so could I turn and let me check my watch here. I think, yes, please. I know I'm right on time. So a couple particulars. Thank you. A couple statistics here, and then I have something that I want to read to you off my phone that literally came in an hour from a scientist at NIST that I think will help describe a little bit more of where we're at. So with that context of that financial impact that I outlined there, the annual budgets across all of the labs in Boulder right now, we can estimate at being about $650 million. And again, the salaries are the largest cost line for those labs. So that is money that in different ways can ripple back out into the communities. There's now the concern to the budgets of all these different labs. You've heard different numbers of a 10% or 20%, 50% reduction in staffing has been proposed. Already the types of layoffs and impacts at the labs are having an impact. And the context that I think you could keep in mind is that the initial layoffs you've probably heard about are within the probationary employees, those who ostensibly are the easiest to fire. There's challenges around virtually any of these layoff and directives that I'm going to describe to you, but the immediate impact has been quite blunt within many of these labs. What I'm hearing them describe is that they're losing not only the probationary staff, but also leadership staff. It has to do with how a given person's role may have been characterized. If you've recently been promoted within a federal agency, technically you are then reclassified as being probationary. And we have received several anecdotes of people who 6 months ago were delighted that they received a new promotion, but that put them into this probationary status. And they are in the list of people who are being laid off as if they were the, say, not that this is, I shouldn't disparage this or anything, it's not meant to mean that, but if you're just out of college and a new hire, there's been some rationale that I've heard from others within the administration that those are not people who are, like they'll be able to find another job, or that they're not the institutional knowledge of the organization. So we're getting these anecdotes to be able to bring these back to Congress and explain, here are the kind of impacts in terms of knowledge that we are losing, and here are the programs that these scientists were working on, and more so, what is really the key message that Congress needs to hear is not the labs or the universities, because they're in the mix of this as well, describing here's the impact to us, we are losing this many people, or we are losing this much money. What we know from conversations with supporters of the administration is that that is seen as a, like, woe is me, and all the free money and easy money that we've been getting, you're cutting it off, and we're sad for that. Take that at face value, that's the kind of reaction that we have. These are, in my experience, there's many people who have no idea what federal agencies do, no idea what certain projects actually have as their impact, and who are the American citizens who count on the data and details coming out of these federal labs. So it's very easy to just broad brush pick a number of employees or a number of dollars in a budget and eliminate that. But that is the context that we're in for now. Also recognize mechanically, we collabs have been going to Congress and these committees and finding who are the leaders within certain committees that have the most authority and are really the audience for being reminded on the value of investing in scientific research agencies. The power has shifted because Congress is willing to give it up to the Office of Management and Budget. OMB is where we are seeing the contacts need to be made down into several layers underneath who is the given person who has been put in charge of overseeing, think thematically, energy, water, natural resources. That is where we're needing to pivot our political advocacy conversations. And that is the biggest challenge. This is all very much moving fast as we try to discern who are those people to speak with. The other way to consider the impacts is it's happening in a group of three. Think layoffs to both probationary employees, and that can mean a mix of both newer, younger employees and longtime veteran employees. Purchase capabilities, purchase protocols have changed at the labs. They've been limited, you may have heard, to the credit cards that a given lab and lab staff would have to buy everything from office supplies to pay for catering for a meeting or to travel for work. All of those cards have been reduced to a $1 spending limit, so virtually eliminated. There's no spending that is allowed right now. And also travel restrictions are in place across the board, even local, as I've heard from one of the labs here. And no, I have to be almost vague. The labs have all said, you didn't hear it from me. Please don't mention that this is what's happening to us, because we don't need the story to get out that we're complaining or that we otherwise are the ones who are giving you information that other people don't want to have out. So please indulge my vagueness here, but add in layoffs and that spending restriction to travel restrictions, even local, like literally not being able to meet people from your lab in Boulder elsewhere on the other side of town in Boulder. Now I've asked, how would they know? Is it because you're not turning in a receipt for the coffee shop, et cetera? And the response is really, we've been told we can't travel. The fear and the leeriness amongst federal staff right now is such that they say, okay, I won't travel. It isn't thinking almost realistically or reasonably, well, how would someone know if I drove from the campus here over to this? They will not do it. And so all of this hobbling of interaction with our scientists is what we're perceiving from Collab's side as being the foundation for a destruction of value and of resources to the American public that is hard to predict right now, but is almost, well, it is guaranteed from my perspective. So one last point, we have a survey on our website where we're asking, you can provide it anonymously, for people to give us examples of impacts that they've seen, that they've experienced directly themselves, or that they know amongst their network of friends. And these examples will help us with the stories that will continue to get up to these proper contacts in Congress. And then I mentioned, this might be in a good way, a email that I just got a little while ago. And believe me, I apologize, I have many more stats here. Many of them are kind of sobering, and I'm running out of time, so I won't spend time giving you more negative things to think about. But I need to assess the context of this, so also indulge me. I'm not going to tell you the scientist's name, but it's a scientist at NIST who said they're specifically targeting medical metrology and standards for termination. And since they're specifically terminating and closing entire programs, there are opportunities to transfer large amounts of equipment, processes, and protocols to nonprofit organizations. Do you know of any nonprofits that might be interested in discussing a business model for medical standards and metrology? We'd love to get something that mimics this Swiss foundation that promotes science-based medicine. So this is where things are going. I'll need to follow up with this, but if you're involved in medical metrology or perhaps bioscience even writ large, this is a very interesting, almost pragmatic reaction that NIST is saying, well, if we're about to lose our access to this equipment, how can we make sure it gets brought into a place with another organization that can continue to leverage this technology? That is something I would perceive will continue to happen from other federal agencies researching other realms of science, climate science, or food production, or robotics, or quantum. Maybe not quantum. That one might be, say, higher on a list of support. But with that reference there, I'll say, think of silver linings. Maybe if I was only 20 years old or younger, like my daughters who are in high school, I could see this as there's decades ahead to figure out, all right, well, there'll be some things that get deconstructed, but then we'll figure out what was really crucial and we'll rebuild that back up. Over a decades kind of timeline, perhaps this is just a version of a reset. But in the immediate right now, we need to find ways to continue to keep these scientists and their research accessible. And something like this suggestion from this scientist on how do we connect with nonprofits is one way. But I'm very open, both anonymously or through direct conversations, to hear what you see as impacts and also how you think we could leverage these connections between the scientists now and some of our congressional leaders. I can definitely take some questions in the last few minutes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for being here today, way in the back. We really appreciate your talk. What we want to know is, where do you think these scientists who are losing their jobs will go?
So it depends on the, say, industry realm that they would have applicable expertise. And we're lucky here in Colorado. We have the largest spectrum of federally funded research laboratories in the country. If there's any given societal challenge that you're interested in, know that there's a lab working on that technology now. But I'd say the focus on ecology and atmospheric and climate science, and in the Department of Interior with the U.S. Geological Survey, there's a range of other types of earth sciences that seem to be the focus right now of the first wave of larger layoffs. And there's not an immediate absorption capacity by the companies or entities in the state to bring in all of those new skilled workers or skilled experts who could take on those positions. So the realms, and boy, there's not an immediate set of opportunities. It will take different scientists to discern almost where do they want to grow their life path. So some can go into more entrepreneurial spaces, and if they have that type of interest and capacity, to be able to take their knowledge of what kind of data, research, and solutions there are and figure out how do we actually commercialize this. Fortunately, in Colorado, there's all sorts of accelerators and other types of organizations that help entrepreneurs to nurture their concept into an actual functional business. So the entrepreneurial realm is one place. There could be, within certain educational districts, opportunities for people to step in and become teachers, but from my own experience, even just here with Boulder Valley School District, and you probably know the state is looking to perhaps be limiting the budget just for our district here. That's been referenced by others at the national level, but it is not necessarily an immediate likely realm of opportunity. Then there are the different technology companies, so think existing companies who are providing services to the government or otherwise out in society to different clientele. And that's likely where the most immediate job opportunities will come, is with companies that recognize the expertise and the contacts, the institutional knowledge and connections that scientists have is a resource to tap into. And the challenge that I hear from scientists that I know who've been laid off is that they're new to looking for work. They are not familiar with what it is to be researching opportunities and preparing a resume and preparing for interviews, et cetera. So the Boulder Chamber, I'll make a reference to them. We're partnering with them and also with the governor's office and with Senator Bennett and Hickenlooper's office. They are creating resources for laid off federal employees that get more into the workforce development side of things for them.
Dan, question. You propose that some of these scientists may go into private industry, perhaps become entrepreneurs. What kind of non-disclosure agreements might they be under, having worked for the federal government from a security standpoint and so forth?
You know, that's a good question. I'm not as familiar with people who might have been handling classified information, and I haven't heard that come up as a challenge or limitation for the scientists. You've prompted me to actually ask around, because I'm not sure then if that maybe is a limitation on the scientists. Ostensibly, one of the values of our federal labs is that taxpayer-funded research is available to, quote, all. That is its own another realm of concern and conversation of who is accessing all of the knowledge and data created by federal labs in America. Is it good faith American companies? Not that that should be a limit, but so I don't know the exact answer to that, but you've made me think I should check.
Yes, Cambridge University applied to Parliament for money to recruit American scientists, and many other countries, including China, have indicated. Have any Colorado scientists been recruited or indicated that they're planning on leaving the country?
So I can neither confirm nor deny the anecdote of which you have described, but as more seriously, this actually even happened during the last government shutdown 4 years ago. Government employees, especially if you have family and bills and mortgage, et cetera, are practically needing to look at any kind of offer that comes their way. Granted, when it comes to ostensibly nefarious other countries perhaps reaching out, that is something that I've heard from scientists has happened, but I don't know of anyone who's indulging the kind of like the conversation. But it's very real that foreign countries, organizations, even those of ours amongst friends, see that there is brilliant knowledge and skill within these federal employees who are being laid off, and if the United States is going to sort of cut off some of its own fingers, then we'll be happy to take some of that knowledge and bring it over here.
Jenny? I'm curious, as far as the research that's been accomplished, is there any protection for it that can be, I guess I fear that it needs to be put in a vault or something where it can't be removed and destroyed?
So the short answer is yes, and then we're all watching, though, the dismissal of and ignorance of not only norms but outright laws and other policy protocol, policy requirements for data protection, for data management amongst this administration. And right now we're still early enough in that the obvious places where, from CoLabs' perspective, we're concerned is seeing given websites or web pages that are now closed down or don't exist, or you get an error when you go to look for certain information. The behind the scenes mechanisms for managing information is almost, well, it's thick. Let me say, I'm learning myself what we took for granted as to being an expectation to protect data and at least have someone managing a library of some version. That is now no longer a premise that we can actually count on. But finding out if that protection is going to stay or who is in charge of that protection is not obvious right now in many cases. And unfortunately, recall too, in the executive branch, so I have a one-person focus group with my older brother who's supportive of much of what he sees going on. Like the executive branch it's in the name. They are to execute the directives and the laws of Congress. And that is a premise that I take seriously and look at all of the funding and the policies and the programs that have been funded by congressional directive and law. Right now, the labs are having to deal with their bosses, and then their ultimate boss is the president, where the labs can only comment in positive terms and in supportive terms of what their boss has said to do, even if it's close down half their staff or close down a particular priority. So it's super frustrating from our perspective, all of us on the outside, perhaps, but know that we'll either hear no explanation for, say, a question like yours, or they will say that, yes, this has been hobbled, or, well, they won't describe it that way. It's more of a short answer of, we fully support the president's priorities, or we fully support the directives that we've been given. On its face, you can think there's no way someone would actually say that. However, the people who work for the federal government, all federal employees are really working for the president, and in my experience, they're loath to say anything publicly that is seen as any reduced support for what the president has said. So this is a tough spot, although it really puts purpose into groups like CoLabs and other scientific advocacy organizations. We're not funded by the federal government. We're supported by membership dues from companies and the universities and economic development organizations. So we can speak up on their behalf and not feel like we could be defunded. But that's the challenge all of these labs have, is they actually can't speak out on behalf of themselves. And right now they can't answer questions for organizations like us to be able to speak up for them. So it's an investigative reporter kind of time, and that's why I mentioned the anonymous survey that we have on our site and other organizations have. Please tell us what you know, and we'll just continue to make an effort to tell the story of the value of taxpayer-funded research. It truly is, science is our national security. And I know I'm over time here too, so.
It's working fine, thanks. Dan, please accept our thanks for your excellent and incredibly timely talk. As your words made clear, we live in challenging times. The constellation of federal labs in and around Boulder and Colorado they're not only good for our city and our state, as you so well articulated, but more importantly, for the well-being of our country. We are proud of the fact that our nation is the leader in scientific discovery in the entire world. And we know that it would not have happened but for the thousands of dedicated scientists who every day put out for their research for not only them, but for our country. It's my fervent hope that we can summon the will to reassemble what we are so callously taking apart. You know, Dan, Rotary has also been a leader in support for science. And that's demonstrated by our 35-year effort to eradicate the scourge of polio. I remember when I was in kindergarten, our next door neighbor's child, who was 4, contracted polio, and it was confined to a wheelchair for the rest of her life. So in appreciation of your talk, in recognition that science has given us a vaccine for polio, and in honor of the Boulder-based world-class scientists you're speaking for, we're donating 100 doses of polio vaccine to the Polio Plus Fund. Thank you from the Boulder Rotary Club.
Oh, thank you. Beautiful. That's, oh, of course. Should we do it together? Is that, just me? Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you, everyone. Oh, on the tables, we put one of our brochures from the annual awards event. There's a listing of the labs in there and all, and contact information. Please, we have more of those, but contact me through there if you'd like.